Okay, continuing on from our last video, we're just going to continue with the shirt. So we've done the shadows, we're now working on the highlights. So a lot of this video will be just more of the same, using the same techniques, using the same brushes, the same procedures and what have you, to get the shading and the highlights the way that I want them over the body. So we're going to work on the shirt. I'll then move on to the vest, and we'll do the same there with the vest as we did with the pants and the shirt. So creating the highlights, putting some seams in, and what have you, and then the boot as well. So right at the end of the video, I'll show you how to put simulate stitches on the boot. So if you want to skip ahead, that's fine, but the rest of this video is just basically going to be the same thing of painting, how to paint the textures and the highlights, just showing you my process as I've worked through it. So feel free to skip ahead if you think that you don't need to see any of this again, or you don't want to see how I've created the build up the shadow and the texture on each piece of the clothing. So the boots will show you how to create simulate some stitches at the end there as well. Again, always checking, going back and forth between max. Okay, so we're just going to continue on now. Okay, so now that we've done all the shadow and on the boots and the highlights, we can start to put in some stitches. So I'm just using the brush tool and I'm creating with 100% on it, both the opacity and the flow. I'm just going around where I want the stitches, just a dotted line. So just showing just a dotted line to simulate the actual stitches themselves, just around the edges here of where I want the actual seam to show up on the boot, or the stitches to show up on the boot. So I'm using obviously a black or a dark brown, a very dark brown to create these stitches, but you can use whatever color you want, of course, depending on whatever it is that you are applying stitches to. So once I've done that and I've laid out where I want the stitches, I can then go through and add a little bit more detail by adding the hole that the stitch actually goes through. So I'm going to do this on separate layers. I'll probably combine them later, but for now all on separate layers in case I decide to change my mind. So then I'm just going through, and at the end of each dash adding just one brush stroke, just a dot, to show where the hole of the stitch, as the stitch has gone into the leather. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm just going to duplicate it a couple of times just to make it a little bit darker, and then collapse it down. I can bring this back, and then I can play with. That was just the stitches, because the stitch holes were obviously dark enough. So I'm just built up the color on the stitches, and then I can play with the opacity to get the look that I'm looking for. I'm now going to go through and add just a little bit of a highlight to each stitch, just to make it, just in the center, to make it look like it's raised, and that'll be the end of the stitches. Okay, with that done, we can have a quick check in Max to see how it's looking. Yep, it's coming along nicely, so you can see the stitches there. It's just a small detail, but it does add to the overall depth and look of the character. Okay, so once I'm happy with that, I can move on to the next part. So we'll do, just since the hair tie is really quick and easy, we'll just add a bit of shadow to that. Okay, excellent. So we can now, I'll leave it here for now, and we'll pick it up in the next video.